Okay, session 3 has the theme Care for Places and Cultures, Ecomuseums and Inclusive Museology, Diverse Cosmologies for Territorial Regeneration. I'm especially delighted to introduce my fellow ICOM trustee and work colleague, Nerys Rudder, as the session chair. Nerys brings many years of experience with ICOM Barbados to the UK, and she's also an outspoken advocate for minorities and global majorities alike. So thank you, Nerys. The stage is yours.
Hello, the room. So I'm going to have to ask for a little bit of grace because it's been a while since I've done anything like this, and I've got the pre-presentation jitters. I think most of us know what that feels like. So I'm just going to take a quick picture of you first, just as evidence that I spoke to so many of you. So thank you, Christian. Good afternoon, gentlefolk. I am Nerys. And we all had a delicious lunch. Everyone who knows me knows I'm a foodie, and that was a fantastic lunch. And hopefully it's given us all the time to catch up with our colleagues and also to make some new connections. And we're re-energized now. After the wonderful presentations, we've had a chance to ingest some of that, and now we're going to start with the Care for Places and Cultures, as Christian had mentioned, Ecomuseums and Inclusive Museology, Diverse Cosmologies for Territorial Regeneration. I love that title, by the way. So I'm very privileged to moderate this. All three of our speakers will speak on directly of Indigenous and community practice, not just directly localized and connected to Brazil, Benin, and Britain, but also their territorial neighbors, regionally and internationally. Now, this morning, in regard to Manchester Museum's role in repatriation of community objects and the gift of the Daddy Kwa 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 dolls, Esme used the phrase that really stuck with me, which was repair and healing. I'd like to think that this session also reflects that ethos and underlines advocacy of place through community to that paradigm. So our speakers this afternoon are Victoria McMillan of Nottingham Trent University in the UK, Luiz Souza of Conservation Science Lab, Federal University of Minas Gerais, I think, Brazil. I think I've pronounced that properly. And Ibrahim Tchan, Director of Tata Somba Ecomuseum in Benin. So I'm going to ask Victoria to join us. Ibrahim and Luiz will be online, so it'll just be us two on the floor. So I'm eager to introduce Victoria's presentation, Ecomuseum Practices in the UK, A Pathway to Land Connectedness and Regenerative Futures, where we will explore the results of her PhD research and ultimately explore a framework for grassroots, social action, and community leadership. So please welcome Victoria.
Hi, and thanks for that introduction, Nerys, and thanks also to the organisers who invited me here today, because I'm not a case study as the others have been. As Nerys said, I'm presenting research findings. So before I begin, I want to acknowledge that the work presented here today stands on the shoulders of work and insights from many scholars, practitioners and community members, without which my research couldn't have happened. So this study began partly in response to two questions posed by reports that came out in 2019. ICOM's The Future of Our Past and the State of Nature UK report, on detailing the perilous environmental and social threats to life on our planet. One asked, what part can heritage play in combating climate crisis and fostering resilient communities? And the other called for research into connecting people to nature and how this relates to sustainable behaviours. At the time, I was working with a community exploring the Ecomuseum concept, and along with years of previous community engagement experience, I thought that the Ecomuseum held great potential to reconnect communities in the UK to their landscapes and encourage grassroots social action. Squeezing 4 years of work into this presentation today might be just a little bit too much. We'll all be here till tea time. So I'm just going to focus on the key characteristics that my study suggests help foster such grassroots action for resilient, regenerative communities. So what is an ecomuseum? Whilst a familiar concept in many countries across the world, they aren't well known here at all in the UK. Ecomuseums evolved out of the new museology movement of the 1970s as one iteration of the social museum in service to its community. Ecomuseums are community-led heritage organisations focused on the relationship between people and place. Unlike traditional museums, ecomuseums aren't bound in a building with physical collections mediated by experts, although this can be part of them. But they safeguard in situ heritage that is in and of the landscape and communities. They're often portrayed as a dynamic way for communities to preserve, interpret and manage their own natural and cultural heritage for sustainability and to help achieve sustainable development goals. Although many scholars and practitioners are pushing to move beyond sustainability to facilitate social and environmental justice and regenerative adaptation, actions and solutions. In this vein, I like to think of them as experiments in insurgent solidarity and regenerative collaboration between people and place, which centre both human and non-human well-being. There's no fixed structure or approach to an ecomuseum which allows each one to respond continually to its own particular local environment and needs. And whilst there are hundreds around the world, ecomuseums are not common nor well studied in the UK. When I started this study, there were just 5, shown here on the map. And these became my case studies. A further 3 have since launched, and others are also under development now. So why are they needed in the UK? The UK is one of the most nature-depleted nations in the world, ranking lowest in Europe. It also ranks lowest in Europe for nature connectedness and for well-being, with a significant gap between people's stated values and the multiple actions people need to take to address environmental and social challenges. Whilst geographer Ian Rudder calls cultural severance the most dangerous threat to conservation of the 21st century. As such, rebuilding connections between individuals and communities and their land is foundational for the health and well-being of human and non-human communities and the environment. Each case study was founded by their communities to address specific social, cultural, environmental and economic threats that face in them, including lack of employment, resources and community opportunities, ageing and shrinking populations, changing lifestyles and habitat loss. Land connectedness is a term and framework that I've developed during my study as a means to understand the deep connections we have to the places we live. And the impact of this connection on people's actions to care for those places. Building on the concept of nature connectedness as a driver for care of nature, land connectedness encompasses all aspects of the land, recognising the co-creative intertwining of nature and culture, human and non-human, the living and the non-living across millennia. This expands the routes of connection for those with specific interests, say in history or plant law, for example, but also reinforces the implicit notion of interconnectedness, rejecting the ideas of human exceptionalisms outside of the rest of nature. These ideas address the conservation threat of the separation or cultural severance of human and other natures to offer possible paths to reconnection. My study explored the different ways through which this deep connection is made, how it's maintained and strengthened, and what implication this has on people's actions towards caring for the places they live and wider climate action. By promoting an holistic conceptualisation of land as a social relationship, land connectedness allows for a broader view than nature connection alone. Primary data from nearly 400 participants from the ages of 2 to about 87 from the case study ecomuseums and their wider communities suggests 6 entangled key themes of land connectedness. Firstly, place matters as an appropriate scale and frame for both meaningful connection, but also for both the conceptualisation of local to global social and environmental issues and the empowering of adaptation and actions. Within the framing of place, themes of kith and kinship, intra and interdependence, dimensions of space and time, storied landscapes and future thinking reflect notions of plurality and interconnectedness through dynamic flows of people and other natures across time and places. These themes were important for both people who had lived a long time in place, but also for those new to a place in creating and strengthening connection and belonging. These dimensions were evidenced to be founded and strengthened through a knowing, belonging, caring feedback loop. intrinsic values of love, empathy, respect and reciprocity, and notions of community. The results indicate a strong connection and entanglement between people and other natures and cultural heritage in landscapes, and of the potential of this strong connection to empower agency in actively caring for both human and non-human communities, with the results showing a strong correlation between high levels of land connectedness and above UK average pro-community, pro-nature and pro-environmental actions. The social dimensions of intrinsic values reflected in the data are particularly important when we consider how we move towards thinking beyond ourselves to an ethic of care and stewardship, as our civic identity includes both environmental and social values, and appealing to one has been shown to lead to spillover concern for the other, even when not explicitly referenced. The synergies between land connectedness and ecomuseum philosophy and practice lends potential for ecomuseums in the UK to use land connectedness as a framework to foster the knowing, belonging, caring feedback loop. Firstly, in promoting land connectedness by creating pathways that support holistic understanding of the interdependence of human and non-human in place, and intrinsic values of love, empathy, respect and reciprocity, with ecomuseums acting as sites of knowledge and skills exchange and a resource for community activity and experience. And secondly, by channeling emotions into action, by empowering opportunities and agency for communities to enact social and environmental solutions. The case study Ecomuseum's aims and practices suggest they're well placed to channel the drive to care generated by increased connection, by acting as a conduit for community agency, action and stewardship. Case study actions included passing on local skills and knowledge such as dry stone walling, habitat restoration, stewardship, ecological monitoring, and community science and history projects, dementia walks, local job creation, and community takeover of local assets. Importantly, one of the key changes highlighted by my participants was the ability of ecomuseums to shift mindsets towards collaborative community working, which was evidenced to extend beyond the ecomuseum projects themselves and to reframe how communities viewed themselves through community agency. Little revolutions was how one participant referred to it, leading to more resilient and adaptive communities. I end this presentation with a framework of key characteristics derived from my research for fostering community connection, resilience and care. Ecomuseums' greatest strengths in acting as community catalysts for adaptive and regenerative change come when they take a community-led and community-first participatory approach in a small, meaningful area, with a focus on inclusion, collaboration and plurality at all levels. Ecomuseums in the UK have the potential to foster pathways to land connectedness through promoting interrelationality, intrinsic values, and opportunities for connection, experiencing, knowing, and celebrating human and non-human natures. The social aspects of the Ecomuseum ethos, collaboration, teamwork, networking, and bringing people and groups together reflect one of the most potent land connectedness dimensions. My research suggests that fostering land connectedness can bridge the values action gap and increase whole community cohesion and resilience, which would be valuable in many settings, but ecomuseums seem particularly well placed to be conduits for both increasing land connectedness and the resultant increased regenerative community action and stewardship. Thank you for listening. That's it.
Is this working? Oh, yes, it does work. Well, what struck me about your presentation, Victoria, was the applicability of your term land connectedness. We did have conversations, by the way, before this. And its framework to many streams of regenerative research. I do look forward to seeing how this will be implemented further afield. So thank you for that. So now, as a conservator and collections manager at heart, this next presentation really struck me as well. We have Luiz Souza, from the Conservation Science Lab of the Federal University of Minas Gerais in Brazil. And he'll be speaking on conservation restoration for social inclusion and museums as regenerative forces, resilience, resistance, and academic community engagement. These are with case studies of the La Pinha Museum and the Museum of Serra de Sipo. We will explore community engagement, collaborative working, and its impact within their territories. Are we connected to Luiz?
Yes, I'm here.
Hi, Luiz.
Hi.
Would you like to go ahead with the presentation, or would you like to introduce?
That's fine. No, that's fine. We can go on.
Deus do céu! Ô, meu pai! Estourou a barragem de rejeito na mina do córrego de feijão. Embrulhadinho, estourou a barragem. Caiu tudo. O que é isso?
A gente só queria ter o que é nosso por direito de volta, porque foi tirado de nós, não foi nós que fomos lá cometendo o maior crime trabalhista e o crime ambiental da nossa história hoje no nosso país. Não foi a Caturama, não foi a Naúchohan.
Porque a gente faz parte da floresta, a gente é floresta, a gente é irmão e irmã de toda a natureza. A gente escuta a floresta falando com a gente sente o que a floresta está sentindo. A floresta está pedindo socorro, dizendo, olha, o que vocês estão fazendo, o que vocês querem para você e o que pode acontecer com você. Se cuidasse como os povos indígenas cuida, a gente não sofreria como a gente está sofrendo hoje em dia. E os pajés da aldeia, eles conseguem sentir isso, eles conseguem ver, eles conseguem ouvir o que a floresta está falando. Então é uma energia que a gente cuida dela e ela cuida da gente.
Num momento desse que a Terra está precisando, a humanidade está precisando de muita oração, de muita proteção, então é um momento que a gente não poderia deixar nunca de fazer.
In the heart of Serra do Cipó, in Minas Gerais, a former colonial state has been transformed, reclaimed and reimagined by the very people who live there. The Cipó Farm Ecomuseum emerged as a grassroots response to the urgent need to value both the cultural memory and the natural heritage of the region. Located in a territory marked by environmental vulnerability and social inequality, but also characterized by a very diverse natural landscape, including rich flora and fauna, the museum grew into a vibrant reference point, not only for preserving stories, but for fostering belonging and action. From the surrounding Quilombo do Açude community, local schools and visiting researchers, everyone plays a role, everyone plays a part. And for our students at the Conservation Restoration Training course at the Federal University of Minas Gerais, the museum offers a unique space to connect conservation restoration with the real world, socially grounded and community-led. Even after severe flooding and a period of neglect, the museum rose again. Our students were actively involved in the conservation process, documenting objects, reorganizing the technical reserve, and curating new exhibitions. What they practiced was not just technical care, but a broader ethic of repair, recognition, and respect. Today, the Cipó Ecomuseum fosters dialogue about the environmental and historical significance of the region. It confronts the legacies of colonial occupation and offers instead a model of coexistence where conservation restoration is embedded in local life and heritage becomes a tool for regeneration. From ruined walls and forgotten archives, a renewed sense of purpose emerges, one rooted in care, community, and ecological awareness.
São senhores de geração para geração, por isso que temos nossa cultura, porque a gente consegue sentir, a gente consegue ouvir, a gente consegue se comunicar com a floresta.
Built in the 70s by an amateur archaeologist with the appearance of a European castle, the Lapinha Museum became, for decades, the place where Lagoa Santa met the world. It welcomed students, tourists, researchers, and dreamers. For the local community and visitors to the cave and the surrounding region, it stood as a proud symbol of archaeological, paleontological, and ecological heritage. But time brought neglect. When the state of Minas Gerais launched the Lund route and built a new museum, detached from the local people and their affections, the Lapinha Museum was pushed aside, its relevance questioned, its future uncertain. We resisted. A Friends Association, supported by civil society and legal advocacy through the Public Prosecutor's Office, secured its legal protection. Today, the building is being restored and its renewed museography will be an act of both repair and regeneration. Our students have been present every step of the way, conducting inventories, digitizing collections, and producing scientific documentation. For the first time in Brazil, an archaeological and paleontological museum will have, or has already, 100% of its collection digitized and accessible to the public. But the regeneration of the Lapinha Museum is not merely physical. It's social, symbolic, and institutional. It's the restoration of dignity to a space that holds meaning, memory, and identity. And soon, the museum will return to the embrace of the people who never stopped calling it their own. To speak of sustainability without regeneration is like healing the surface while leaving the wound untouched. Museums must be more than showcase of the past. They must be living space of listening, care, affect, and transformation. We are not only facing an environmental crisis, we are living through a crisis of connection, of meaning, of affection. The planet is exhausted. Communities are wounded, and we, as cultural professionals, are called to imagine new ways of caring, not only for collections, but for people and the places they inhabit. Conservation restoration in this expanded vision is not just about objects, not just about the materiality. It's about mending relationships, repairing stories, and co-creating more just and resilient futures. Rooted locally, yet connected globally, regenerative museums remind us that another world is possible if it begins with empathy, with deep listening, and with an enduring sense of shared responsibility. Thank you very much.
Luiz, your presentation frames how effectively you've been working with neglected communities. We've previously spoken on how you help to identify objects that need conservation from these communities and basically stepping away from the colonial-centric collections. And I have to applaud you. Would you like to speak on this, on the presentation?
Yes, thank you very much. First of all, thank you for inviting me. Thank you to the organizers for the invitation, and also congratulations for Lucimara for leading the first presentation. So here in Brazil, it's really, the role of ecomuseums is really important. And the previous presentations showed up some of the concepts. In our case in particular, since we have a conservation training at the university, we are trying to open up, widen the perspective of our colleagues and our teachers and also for our students so that they can see that we have much more than just the colonial heritage here, and we have several neglected communities. So these are just examples of what we have, but this is not just a situation only in Brazil. I think it's everywhere. So the fact that we are calling for care, for affection, it goes along with the whole humanity, I think.
Thank you for that. So rounding out our session is now Ibrahim Tchan, Director of Tata Somba Ecomuseum in Benin. He will now be presenting on the Tata Somba Ecomuseum, Regeneration Through Community, Culture and Earth. This presentation explores how the Ecomuseum Tata Somba is a trans-boundary model located in the heart of Cotomacu in northern Benin, and it models participatory management of local indigenous architecture, specifically the Taca-Enta. a very quick end, but I will have to say I was thoroughly enjoying that. Ibrahim, your presentation has landed with me on a very personal level, coming from the Caribbean with a very specific historic community-led aesthetic in our architectural style in regards to the channel houses, and also being exposed to indigenous and traditional Fijian bures. I see your program model as having international potential in celebrating and advocating indigenous architecture. So thank you very much for that presentation. I thoroughly enjoyed all three. In fact, all of these, but especially ours. So, but I want to thank you, Victoria, Luiz, and Ibrahim for your submissions. They've been excellent examples of regenerative endeavors planted in your landscapes and inherently dependent on the communities and cultures that they're located in. And so now I'm just going to open the floor to questions immediately so that you guys can be grilled by our fabulous audience here. There are some roving mics around, and I'm just going to ask that anyone who has a question, just introduce yourself and your organization first, just as an introduction. So do we have any questions from the audience? Oh, yes, Lucy Mara has got her hand up. Here comes the mic. Oh, very quickly, the mic is coming to you.
Okay, Lucimara Letele from Brazil. Of course, I'm very passionate about ecomuseums. We have lots of ecomuseums in Brazil, and the history of indigenous communities are great. Luiz and Victoria and Ibrahim, thank you for accepting our invitation. I think one thing that Ibrahim brings, and Luiz as well, is the role of conservation in museums, how we can start conserving the future. Can we conserve the future and conserve the future? It's actually a role of regeneration. So I think you invite us very much about this. And one thing that I was going to ask is, how can we inspire other museums that are not necessarily eco-museums? And also, Victoria, with your research, how much your research has been having an echo in all the types of museums in terms of helping the fact that eco-museums bring people back to their lands, to be proud of their lands. And one of the main problems we have is the displacement of people. And we are displaced when we're global and we don't feel connected to place anymore. So my question to you, Victoria, and to you all, is how can we inspire the other museums, not necessarily the eco-museums, conceptualize as such to become eco-museums in terms of how they work and how they operate? And this notion of bringing back the care and the proudness of the land and to be back to our places again.
I think that's an excellent question. Victoria, do you want to lead?
Hello? Does that work? I think it works.
Oh, does that work?
Does it work?
Oh,
yeah,
there we go.
Obviously quite a big question. I think, it's something that museums are doing. I walked around some of the museums in Liverpool yesterday. And obviously they have a lot of focus on place and things like that. And the presentations this morning, particularly the first three, were saying what their museums are doing to focus on place and stuff. So people are doing it, and it's quite heartening that the same language is running through everybody's. It's about emotional connections, and people talked about being place being important and all those things, which maybe 10 years ago people weren't discussing such things. But yeah, I'm a great believer in you have to come out of the walls, which again was talked about today, but a lot of museums don't do. And I'm a great believer that communities have to lead. So whatever your communities are, no community is a single community. Everybody's got lots of different types of, whether it's diasporas or different communities within communities, and the same for the eco-museums, they do as well, and they still have work to do on, having open doors and sort of allowing plurality in as well, and different ways of knowing and connecting and thinking and being with the land. It's not really answering your question, is it?
I think it raises intersectionality within our communities, which is a fantastic a theme. I'll ask Ibrahim, would you like to speak on how we can get other museums to think along the lines of of an eco-museum?
Thank you so much, Nerys. Thank you, Lisimara. Thank you, all of you. Thank you, Luiz and Victoria, to chair this panel with me. I'm very happy to be here and speak about our work and see how we can still continue to thinking about the role of Ecomuseum in the conservation of heritage and community knowledge. So yes, we have to rethink about what is the museum. The museum should not be the same when you travel around the world, because in Europe, for example, the museum means another thing. For me, in Africa also, the museum should not be the same thing. So we have to thinking about how we can come back to the past, because we are losing our way when we try to put some of our objects, some of our artifacts, and some of our knowledge or heritage in the glasses. So we have to open some of the concepts of the museum. We have to open it to the traditional knowledge, to the community, to those who have this object or this heritage, to ask them how they want to preserve this kind of object or this kind of heritage. I think doing this, we can help all the museum to become more community-led museum, more museum in the service of community.
I think that's an excellent point. Luiz, would you like to chime in as well?
Yes. In terms of inspiring other museums, I think there is space for everyone. Because, for example, let me take as just an example, museums which normally would be connected to something more cold, like science and technology museums. Even in this case, we have space for recognizing the roles and the importance of traditional knowledge, for example. Traditional knowledge which is brought by Quilombola communities here in Brazil, for example, traditional knowledge which is dominated by indigenous populations. And as a scientist, I've been, and also as a conservator, I've been trained about more than 20 years ago, 30 years ago, even 40. And normally it would be normal to see, for example, if someone would come with a local solution for example, for combating biodeterioration, my superiors at the time, they would say, oh, no, this is not scientific, it's not proven, so let's leave it over there. Nowadays, we have to look. So coming back to the question, how to engage other museums, and back to the question about science and technology, I think there is space for everyone, as long as we know how to cope the collection and the mission of the museum with the specific communities. Another point that I would like to raise is that by looking at the presentation by Ibrahim and the way preservation and conservation and restoration is mentioned, I think it goes along with the concept that I'm working on as well. Because if we think about conservation, restoration, in theory, we start with the importance of the image and the interpretation of the image and the objects as well. So it's very material. But then, as long as with the advancement of theoretic theory in conservation, we have more importance given to values and to societies. But then, I'm using this term here, and I really think that this is a very appropriate occasion to do this. We are dealing with the concept of regenerative conservation, where communities would be interpreted as co-authors, where inclusion, and then inclusion here has another meaning as well, because normally we are speaking to us. I'm speaking at the ICOM UK, which congregates most of the professionals in the museum. But we, as conservators, we also need visibility within this sphere. So that's why I'm not using the concept of social museology, because social museology, we are looking outside of our own bubble. But I think that we should also look into our own bubble and see how we can work on the concept of inclusiveness within our own field. Thank you.
I agree with that wholeheartedly. Okay, so we have 2 minutes left. So I think we have enough time for one more question. Is there anyone in the audience that would like to ask a question of any of our panelists? I'm looking around. I know that Christian's got his hand up. If there's anybody else, all right then, Christian.
Thank you. I know I've just shown you the 2-minute sign, and this seems very unfair now, barging with the question there. But it's an incredibly exciting discussion, and I'm very sorry that sorry for Ibrahim and Luiz. It's Christian Bas and Luiz. It's very nice to see you on the screen, and I'm very sorry that neither of you could be here today. Sorry, that was a reference. I met Luiz, I think, 3 years ago. Last week we saw each other in person, so that's why I'd actually hoped you'd be here. I wanted, there's a big theme running through here, and also Sadhu's presentation earlier about intangible heritage. We tend to traditionally think of museums as having stuff that we do things with, but the new ICOM museum definition obviously very deliberately includes intangible heritage as well, and perhaps it's less of a question. I'm looking at my watch here now, so just a comment perhaps to spark further discussion afterwards. The importance of intangible heritage really can't be underestimated, and I'd love to hear from all three of you actually about more of this, but I'm probably going to have to close this now, unless there's some very, very, very quick thoughts from either of you.
I'm going to put Ibrahim back in the spotlight, because I think in terms of built heritage, your presentation was very specific to that theme. Do you want to respond to intangible heritage within this presentation, within regeneration?
Yes, behind this heritage that I present to you, there is intangible heritage, because everything is in the mind of one people or old people. They sometimes they live with this all this knowledge. And also behind the Tchan, there is many invisible part of the Tchan. The Tchan is connected with nature, with universe, with people, with land. There is many practices, many rituals, many ceremonies that have been performing in the Tchan. So saving this building, physical building, we also are saving all this intangible knowledge. And it's very difficult because there is no university, there is no school where you can go and learn how you can build the Tchan or how you can perform some ritual or ceremony. So it's very important now to start to create this kind of space where youth can come and learn from the old people how they used to live from generation to generation.
Thank you so much for that, Ibrahim. I'm going to close with a thank you to my three wonderful presenters, but also a thank you to Victoria. We did focus on the online presenters in this time just because of access, but I'm assuming that you will be open to any questions in the break and this evening. So thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you.